Hello, welcome to Economics 232. This is Dr. James Yohe, Gadsden State Community College, and today we're going to talk about Chapter 9, Monopoly. Okay, this is a video lecture, not a video quiz, so there are no questions. This is just to help you during the COVID-19 lockdown. Okay, let's get started. Today we're talking about monopoly, and that's a market structure. Okay. We will learn how, move that up there, we will learn how a monopolist determines what price to charge for their output, how much output to produce, and in order to maximize profit or minimize loss. Remember, all businesses in the neoclassical paradigm are assumed to be profit maximizers, and they will all produce to the point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Do not ever forget that. Now, what is a monopoly? A monopoly is a market structure in which there is a single seller for a good or service versus many small sellers in perfect competition. They produce what is called a unique product, which means there are no close substitutes for that product. Think of something like electricity or to your house, water, gas, okay? The government is a monopolist producer of security services. No one else could arrest or detain somebody or make laws except for the government. The government is a monopolist in that market. And there's impossible entry into the market. Now, the most common monopolies are local monopolies. Think of power companies, Alabama Power, or wherever, depending upon where you live. A certain power company is the only company that can provide electricity to your house through underground lines or above ground lines. The water district is another example. Okay. Now, what does it mean to have a unique product? It means there are no close substitutes for that product. Okay. Some reasons for impossible entry and exit is owner of a vital resource. Although in reality, I don't think this ever happened. The closest thing that we've got as an example was bauxite production under Alcoa, which is an aluminum company. They had a large portion of bauxite production, but they were not the sole owner of bauxite. Other people could get and produce bauxite. Legal barriers, these are the most typical. The government comes in and says, this company is a legal monopolist. They are the only ones that can, for example, provide electricity to your homes. No one else, by law, can come in and run wires from a generating plant to your home. Okay. Economies of scale. This occurs where this is theoretically could occur where a firm in an industry, as it increases the amount of output it produces, that causes its long-run average total cost to decrease. So theoretically, one firm could provide 100% of the output in an industry at a lower average cost curve than if that output were divided amongst more than one firm. Again, this is a theoretical thing, and no one's ever shown or proved it. When we talk about natural monopolies, the natural monopoly theory came after people were granted natural monopolies. AT&T is an example. It was proposed, not thought or known, but proposed, that if you hooked everybody up to one phone network, that would reduce long-run average cost for producing phone calls. Of course, we found out that wasn't the case when AT&T was broken up. Now, you can make a phone call on your cell phone almost free, while that same phone call under AT&T for a 15-minute long-distance call, say from the West Coast to the Midwest, would run you $50, and now that we have competition, it's almost virtually free. Okay. So here's advantages of economies of scale. Because of economies of scale, a single firm in an industry will produce output at a lower per unit cost than two or more firms. Okay. And this led to natural monopoly theory. And this is an industry in which the long-run average cost of production declines throughout the entire market. So one firm will produce output at a lower per unit cost than two or more firms in the industry. This has been used as justification for things like electric power monopolies, as we said before, phone monopolies, gas, water, etc., fire protection. Now, a monopolist is different from a perfectly competitive firm. We said that perfectly competitive firms are price takers, that the price that all firms take in an industry is determined by the supply and demand curve intersection for that market. Supply and demand for the market intersect, that determines the market price, and that market price is taken by all firms in the industry under perfect competition. A price maker doesn't mean that a monopolist can make up any price that it wants. All it simply means is that a firm faces a downward sloping demand curve. Okay. Now, under perfect competition, demand and marginal revenue were the same curve. But under monopoly, a monopolist, their curves are downward sloping. Okay? And we'll look at that in a minute. Now, the monopolist demand curve is the same thing as the industry or market demand curve. They are one and the same. So if we go back to perfect competition, we have two graphs, the market and then each individual firm. For a monopolist, they are the market. They are the industry. Therefore, the market demand curve, say for electricity in Etowah County, is the demand curve for a monopolist. And that demand curve is downward sloping and to the right. Demand determines the price for a monopolist. Monopolists cannot make any price that they want. They must respond to a demand curve in the neoclassical paradigm. Now, in this case, the marginal revenue curve is not the same as the demand curve. The marginal revenue curve is always underneath or less than demand at any given quantity, and we'll show you that in a few slides. But why is that? And that is because the monopolist faces a downward sloping demand curve. To sell more output, the monopolist has to reduce the price that it charges for all units of output. So if I were selling 9 units of output at $10 a piece as a monopolist, and I wanted to increase the amount of output I produce and sell, say to 10 units, I can't sell a 10th unit at the price of $10. So in order to sell that 10th unit, I have to reduce the price of all my output, maybe let's say to $9.50. So if I want to produce a 10th unit of output, I have to sell all of those units at $9.50, while before I was charging $10 and I could sell all 9 of my units of output. So all the units of output that are produced, the price of them has to be decreased if the monopolist wants to increase their output so that all of their output gets sold on the market. And here is a look at those things. So you can see here, okay, here is the demand curve, okay, for output, and here is the marginal revenue. To produce more output and sell it on the market, say to go from 2 units of output to 4 here, I have to decrease the price that I sell all of my units of output. So here I might have to decrease that price from, that looks like about $60 down to, we'll call that 35. Okay? not just the additional units of output get marked down, it's also all of the previous units. Everything sells at $35, $40 a piece. And that causes marginal revenue to decrease and to be less than price on the demand curve at any given quantity. So the marginal revenue curve is always beneath the demand curve. As a result of this, you can see here, we have price and we have marginal revenue. Once you get to 3 units of output, the marginal revenue for this monopolist starts to go below 0, which means that producing an additional unit of output will reduce revenue. Okay? So maybe here at 3 units of output, we're selling that output at about $50 a unit. If we were to produce 4 and drop the price to $35 per unit, that would cause marginal revenue, or excuse me, total revenue to actually decrease. And in here in this graph, that would be by $50. Okay? And that results in the monopolist facing a total revenue curve that increases up to some point, maxes out, and then after that, revenue starts to decrease, total revenue. Now, in order for a monopolist to maximize its profits, or if it's not making a profit, minimize its losses, it has to produce at the point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Okay? So here, demand in black, marginal revenue in orange. You can see here that this marginal revenue curve decreases. It's always beneath demand. Where marginal revenue crosses this blue-green marginal cost curve, that is where profit is maximized by producing, in this case, 4 units of output. So we use marginal revenue, where it crosses marginal cost, goes straight down. That determines how much output the monopolist will produce. This monopolist will produce 4 units of output. Once we've done that, we take that output, trace it up to the demand curve, and this monopolist can sell those 4 units of output at a price of $100 a piece. So total revenue would be the 4 units of output times the $100 price tag for those output units, and that would be total revenue equal to $400, price times quantity. Now, average total cost, we can figure out how much this firm is going to pay in total cost by taking this output of 4 units, tracing it up to the green average total cost curve, and going straight across, and we'll call that $60. So this firm produces 4 units of output, we'll call it 65, pays $65 on average for each unit of output. 4 times 65 is $270. So we sell our 4 units of output for $400, the area of this rectangle, going from quantity up to the demand curve and over to price. That's our revenue, 4 times 100, 400. And we pay 4 times $65, $270 in total cost to produce that output. You can see here, that line represents the top of the total cost box, $65 times 4 units. The area of this rectangle, the width times the height, is $270. That's this bottom box. Revenue, we trace quantity up to the demand curve and go straight across to the price that gets charged. $100 times 4 units. Total revenue, the area of this big rectangle here, is $400. 400 minus 270, the area of this yellow rectangle, is equal to profit. So we sell them at 100, It costs us $65 to make each unit on average. That gives us a profit margin, or the difference between price and average total cost here, of $35. Times 4 units of output, we make $35 in profit. That's the height of this box. And we do that for 4 units of output. 4 times 35 is $140. So this firm, make sure that's right. $100 minus 65 is 35 times 4, 120, 145, is that right? Oh wait, 35 times 4 would be 120 plus 20, $140. So total profit would be 140. Now, this is a different picture here. You can see his average total cost curves up here. This firm will still produce to the point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Marginal revenue is the second downward sloping line here. That is what's added to revenue for each additional unit of output. That's the orange line. Marginal cost, you can see that upward sloping J curve here in blue-green. Where those two cross, that determines how much output this firm will produce. Tracing that output up to the demand curve, they'll sell that output at $100 a piece. So the total revenue, this box here, 100 times 4, is $400. But now, average total cost of each unit of output, we trace the amount of output we produce up to the average total cost curve. This firm pays $150 on average for each unit of output. Total costs are equal to average total cost of $150 times the 4 units of output. That's $600. $600 in cost being subtracted from $400 in revenue produces a $200 loss. That rectangle, or the loss, is equal to the distance here between average total cost and price. We pay $150 on average to produce those units of output, only sell them for $100. That's negative $50 times 4 units of output. This firm is losing $200. A monopolist can make a loss in the short run, and they can make a profit in the short run. In the long run, a monopolist can make a profit, and that is because there is no entry or exit, or impossible entry and exit into the industry. If I'm making a profit as a monopolist, and by law, no one can enter into the industry, no one can come in and compete with me, produce more output, drive the price in that market down. So a monopolist, unlike a perfectly competitive firm, can make a long-run economic profit. That will be it for this particular video. Thank you very much for listening. Have a great day.